Hello, hello, hello. I hope everyone is well on this very lovely Tuesday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're logging in from. My name's Steve Fuller, Communities Director and founder of Race and STEM, and I'm here with some very exceptional people, in which I'm going to introduce or ask them to introduce themselves to you momentarily. Okay, but just from an introductions perspective, we're here to have a discussion today around clinical diversity. So, hello and welcome to Race and STEM's Clinical Diversity webinar powered by BioTalent. Okay, now Race and STEM is a global community of empowered people from different multicultural backgrounds within the science, tech, engineering, and math space. The platform is a vessel for collaboration, catalyst for career change, and a safe space for people to discuss all things. Okay. Now, with that being the case, we're kicking off with a poll question. Okay. And the question is, where would you go to find out reliable information regarding clinical trials? We've got four answers here potentially to discuss: Google, a doctor or healthcare professional, friends or family, or other. I'm going to go around the room real quick, okay? So we'll start off with Tiffany. What do you think in general to this first question in regards to where might we find out about clinical trials?
I'm going to actually say family and friends. Just based off of my experience, that's going to be family and friends more so than doctors or
Okay,
any other one.
okay. A quick reason why?
A lot of times referrals go a long way. And if you know someone that's been successful in a clinical trial or had a good experience, they're liking to share that with others. And so that's when you learn, okay, I may give this a chance. So that would be family and friends referring a good experience over to someone else.
Beautiful, beautiful. Mr. Barry, where would you go to find out reliable information regarding clinical trials? In fact, let me rephrase that. Where might people think to go? Not yourself. Where might people
Right.
think to go?
No worries, no worries. In my opinion, definitely say Google, being as though that some of our friends and family be just as educated or on the same level as I am in regards to the information. So naturally, people want to go to where they feel as though they can get the most information and opportunities to be able to choose which information is good for them. So I would definitely say Google.
Lovely. Taya?
I would say here locally, we have so many phase one units that there are a lot of advertisements that go out on radio and TV. So people might be inclined to call and may be curious about what it involves to participate. But or if they have a rare disease or they have just been diagnosed, they may even reach out to like a patient group of other patients that are going through similar things.
Beautiful. And finally, Mr. Michael Young himself. He's graced us, everyone. He's come through. He's come through adversity and he's here with us this afternoon, this morning, wherever he is. Michael, how are you? And a very quick question for you, which I've asked everyone else. Where would you find out reliable information regarding clinical trials? Or where might you think people would go to? Google, doctor or healthcare professional, family, friends, or other? Michael, I think you're on mute, my friend. There we go. No, he's still on mute.
Can you now hear me?
We can now hear you.
Indeed.
Perfect.
Indeed. So, first of all, thank you very, very much for having me. I'm joining you from the left coast of the U.S. here in California, and I think that this is a tremendous opportunity to help with some educational background here. A lot of the clinical data shows that most people who are not familiar with clinical trials are often hear about these things either through their physician or actually, as Barry's pointed out, through searches on the internet. But your question was really about reliable information. And I think that that's a very different thing because it involves something that I hope we're going to talk a bit more about, which involves trust. So This is one of the things here, and that's where I'll go back to what Tiffany and Taya have brought up is patients or individuals who are suffering with some sort of medical complications and have been through other treatments with their doctors will often get to a point where there are no good answers, and that's when they start to look for clinical trials.
Well, everyone, here is Michael Young. He's going deep straight away, which is absolutely fine. This is what we love. Listen, I'm so grateful to you all. Thank you for that. We'll cover some of the findings in regards to that later on. But just from a housekeeping information perspective, we're going to be recording today's webinar, which obviously means that it'll be available for people to listen and watch on platforms in the very near future. Okay. Also, we have a specific question and answer opportunity on Teams specifically. So if there are any questions during today's webinar, please feel free to write them in there and we will aim to address some of those questions towards of the webinar. Okay. So as I said earlier on, Race in STEM is a global community of empowered people from different multicultural backgrounds within the science, tech, engineering, and the mathematics space. This platform is a vessel for collaboration, a catalyst for career opportunity, and a safe, judgment-free space to share one another's opinions, experiences, and ideas. Okay, so my name is Steve Fuller. I'm founder of Race in STEM and Communities Director for BioTalent. This is what I do. I love bringing people together to discuss interesting topics or conversations within this arena. And I'm going to pass the mic literally around the four of you to give a 30 to 60 seconds literally introduction, if you can, in regards to who you are, what you represent, and what you're doing here today. So I'm going to go in order of Barry, Taya, Michael, and Tiffany, if that's okay.
All right. Thank you again, Stephen, for having me on your platform, and thank you to Race in STEM as well. My name is Barry Holmes Jr. I am the Vice President of Strategy and Development of Genesis Medical Research Group, just as well as every one of my colleagues here. I'm here to make sure that we are speaking in fact and in truth about clinical diversity and clinical trials and its participation, the need in the community, and the need of also to make sure that the underserved populations are getting this information as well.
Thank you, sir. Taya.
Hello, I'm Taya Romero, and I work currently as the Director of Alliance Management for a company called Scout. We provide patient reimbursements and solutions to help keep patients engaged in trials. I have mixed race children. I have a son with rare disease. I'm very dedicated to finding answers. And in this space, I think we definitely need to have more diverse voices speaking out for those that can't. So that is why I'm here, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you. Michael?
So thanks again for having me. My name is Michael Young, and I lead for the last 8 years a C-suite consultancy in the clinical trial space, as well as pharmaceutical marketing. And we work at this intersection to try and help innovator organizations, pharmaceutical and biotech companies, understand the importance of doing their clinical trials in the right way. And part of that involves making sure that there is correct representation of the study populations that you're looking at. So I'm very pleased to be here and look forward to engaging in this conversation.
Thank you, Michael. And finally, Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Steve, for having me again. My name is Tiffany Ashton, and I am the Director of Operations at ClinEssentials. I am a clinical research professional with over 20 years of experience, and I got my start many moons ago as a clinical research coordinator in the African American and Hispanic communities. And so I would like to bring some firsthand experience to this webinar. And since that time, I have gone on to be a CRA and also a CTM. And at the CTM level, I try to voice some of the things that I saw at the CRC level to make sure that the studies that we're doing really represent the population that will be ultimately taking the drug. So I'm very happy to be a part of this, very dear to my heart topic. Also did my thesis on how education, health education can get more African Americans included into clinical research trials. So definitely something that I am excited to be and share my experience on the panel.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. And
Yes.
first hand, second hand, third hand, fourth hand, doesn't matter. All hands are welcome here, especially for this type of discussion here today. With that being the case, we're going to kick off with, I think, a very interesting question. It kind of opens up quite a number of areas into the talk today. There's been an increase in wanting to know more about clinical trials over the last few years. Why? Quite simple. Why is that? Barry, I'm going to come to you first, my friend.
Awesome. My thought process behind the reason of the increase has to do with three things: the advancements in medical research, patient advocacy and education, and media coverage and public opinion. So, I mean, basically, the more the public is informed and understanding that there are breakthroughs that are happening within the industry, the more of the need to stress the importance of clinical trials, and for all of us, all minorities and underserved populations to participate. And with all the different success, failures, and controversies that do come along with clinical trials, understanding that there are going to be news documents that are written, papers, and of course, social media discussions such as the one we're having right now, completely enforces the need again for the message to put out in regards to recruitment and participation in clinical trials. And organizations such as Race and STEM, and myself included with Genesis Medical Research Group, just being active within the community, bringing awareness, dispelling any type of myths and things that were basically presented in a certain way, but there are actually facts that present the truth. Once again, this is all still reinforcing the need and the understanding of clinical trials participation in the community.
Cool. Anyone else want to add to that? I mean, for me personally, there's always a personal reason as to why I think people want to find out about something, because it might have there might have been an experience of something that's happened to them and themselves or to a family member. And I think for me and a lot of the world, especially when we have a global pandemic which takes place, and we have professionals who are talking on our TV screens every single day and night, and they're talking about these things which have no idea, goes over my head, it can go over my neighbor's head and what type of stuff. There's a reason as to wanting to know why this vaccine has not worked on me, but it's worked on you, So again, to find out more about clinical trials, go back to the first question: where might people find out more about it? Anyone else want to chime in here with their thought process in regards to this question?
Well, Steve, if you don't mind, I'll add a little bit here to what you've just brought up, because I think in the last 4 years, without doubt, the COVID epidemic brought the word clinical trials to the kitchen table in everybody's house. And I think that people wanted to understand how were these being conducted, how important, and what was that data that was actually being generated. And while huge kudos to the consortium that was built between industry, academia, and the public in actually getting these trials effectively done, for those who are listening may not be aware that the majority of the clinical trials that were done for the COVID vaccines, and there were multiple vaccines produced, each of those trials had upwards of 30,000 patients in them. So it was a massive recruitment, effort that was underway. A lot of it driven by altruism, because people wanted to be helpful and they wanted to volunteer for those kinds of things. However, in retrospect, in looking at these trials, what we've come to understand is the vast majority of the people who were enrolled in those trials were actually not the affected populations and the populations that most needed the vaccines. And as typical of many scenarios, most of these folks were underrepresented and minority populations. The vast majority of the people who were tested in the COVID trials were middle-class American whites.
Interesting. You bring up something there which I think we need to tap into a little bit more there, Michael, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, Tiffany or Taya. The language of clinical trials. You know, how is the language of clinical trials portrayed, and how could it be improved?
Yeah. I'll take a stab at this one. Definitely, from my experience working in the research center at the local Black and Hispanic communities, they were unaware, not sure. And so we really had to break down what is a clinical trial. And then the first thing, oh, am I going to be a guinea pig? No. And so we had to go through all of those questions, testing. Is it safe? Will I receive compensation if something happens? All of those questions that maybe others who've experienced clinical trials or had family members that experienced clinical trials may or may not look to ask. Though that was the barrier that we had to overcome and spend a lot more time during the screening visit with education. And so once we educated, once we went through the informed consent in a detailed manner, they were more receptive. But you have to make sure that you're meeting, and that's why they have the ICFs written at a fifth grade level, and not necessarily because people are incompetent, but just we know those medical terminologies, they can get very cumbersome. And so just breaking it down to a level where they can understand the risks, the benefits, what to expect, that went a long way. So I can say that the education piece up front during that screening visit, or even a pre-screening visit, or even sending the consent ahead of time and making sure a family member's there with them, definitely helps with covering that. Wanting to be familiar, wanting to be reassured, and coming from their own doctor, being the principal investigator of the study, went a long way versus just advertising and getting someone that was unfamiliar with the clinic. That's how you get more participants, using participants within your practice, and because they already have that bond established with their doctor. So those are some of the techniques that worked well with our patients at that screening visit.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I would add on that, I feel like there's the inclusivity piece is missing often, right? Like the way that we speak to the patient is not necessarily thinking, oh, how is the patient feeling in this moment? We're actually just kind of speaking to each other. We know that someone else in clinical research is working on this. What is the coordinator going to say when they get the protocol? We're kind of like speaking in each other's language and to each other, but not really considering the patient. And, the patient's taking time out of their day to do this. The patient may be missing work to participate. The patient has children, who's watching the children. Maybe the patient has a pet who's going to walk the dog if they have to travel out of town to participate. All of these things need to be considered and talked about. We don't talk about the participants as whole people. We talk about them as participants. And I think we need to change that language. And
yeah,
that's what I would add.
Yeah.
I'd love to reinforce that, Taya. The industry itself, unfortunately, because all of this is designed around making sure that you have the data and the dossier developed in order to provide this to the regulatory authorities. So a lot of the things that happen in a box checking environment like this completely ignore or neglect the fact that the patient is often providing a very real piece of themselves in giving their blood or their tissue, et cetera. just the language, just as you're saying, Steve, the language when we refer to them as subjects as opposed to people, when we talk about what they're actually providing, instead of thinking about how that impacts individual patients and their lives, as you brought up, Taya, we're just thinking about how do we get that piece of data? How do we get that sample? How do we get this, follow-up information? Making sure that making sure that the patient can just even make it back to the clinic for a follow-up visit is often neglected. And the drug development industry wonders sometimes why patients don't continue to return, and many times it's because they haven't been valued as an individual.
Yeah,
Absolutely. There's everyone wants to feel a certain way, don't they?
hmm
And when you identify someone as a subject,
hmm
as a participant,
hmm
Right.
we talk about belonging and inclusion, right? You know,
exactly.
somebody has made a point of this in the chat. Thank you so much, Andy. Reconfirming that it's we're patients, we're here to be a part of something. We don't want to feel isolated. And I know that each one of you have given fantastic examples previously as to how you can feel belonging within a study, and things like that. The language, the relationships, and I think this is a nice segue actually between sponsors, hospitals, patients. Are they in harmony?
I don't believe so. Just jump out there and say that first and foremost that with Genesis Medical Research Group creating a diversity certification to empower and help healthcare and clinical research professionals understand and engage minority patients. The reason for that is because of the lack of trust that already exists, the lack of understanding, the lack of patients being able to come in and see a likeness, someone that is of them, in order to feel the comfort level that is needed to address the things that are actually ailing them when they come into the offices. If they don't see any type of correlation to themselves, they'll be much more hesitant in sharing their personals. So the language definitely has to change. There definitely has to be an understanding, and more importantly, there has to be more empathy from healthcare and clinical research professionals when dealing with the patients, in order to truly be able to see some change.
Yeah, I agree. I often say it's like being a woman, you're walking into an oncology office and it's nothing but men. If that happened to you, you would take a step back. You may not even complete your visit that day. You would be wondering why there's no women in that office. So we need to have diverse staff as well. I agree with what Barry is adding.
How do you achieve that though? If it's talking about diverse staff, we obviously want the ideal is a situation where we're as diverse as possible in everything, from the patients to the doctors to we just want the world to be as loving and diverse as possible. However, the cold hard facts are that it's not achievable. So, what are some of the steps that we need to do to enforce or help navigate more inclusion and diverse workforces on both sides of or all sides of the scale?
Well, Steve, I'll jump in and just simply suggest that often when you're trying to move communities to change behavior, you have to put in a system of rewards and punishments, if you will. And I think that it's a situation where we are slowly but surely moving in that direction. Clearly, in December 2022, when the FDA provided guidance on diverse and equitable participation in clinical trials, an act that they referred to as DEPICT, it requires that those organizations, whether it be companies, hospitals, institutions, individual clinics, intend to start a clinical trial, they have to have, an actual diversity action plan as a part of their submission to the regulatory bodies, to the FDA, to the local and state organizations. And in addition, I would say that beyond that quote unquote recommendation and requirement, you're now seeing legislation buried deep inside the Inflation Reduction Act, this omnibus bill. There is a requirement that for phase 3 trials, which are, for those listening here, are those trials in which you're most familiar, where you're looking to understand the effectiveness, not just the safety of the drug. There is a requirement for a diverse, patient population. And so, they require now that the diversity plan has to include the enrollment goals. They have to have those actually separated and taken apart so that people can understand what age groups are being involved, what sex are going to, what racial and ethnic characteristics are going to be in your trial. You have to have a rationale behind those goals. Why are you studying these people? And then most importantly, that there has to be something in there about how you're going to reach out and what your enrollment strategies are going to be to try and get the right patient population represented.
Fantastic. The you raised a valid point about gender, race, ethnicity. Let's just talk about diversity in general there, and the data that comes with. Data is key to trials. I think that everyone is in agreement of that by the shaking of the head. How best to track this data? Some of the ideas here, you've all worked in industry in one way, shape, or form, whether it's very much hands-on. Tiffany, you've written books and theses and dictionaries on stuff, and what have you. Some of the some ideas into how we can track everybody can track data when it comes to this.
So I'll jump out there. I know that within a clinical trial, there's something called interactive, we call it the IVRS, so interactive voice response system, and it tracks all of the patients that are coming into the study, their race, sometimes if you program it accordingly, their age, male or female, their sex as well. And so if a study has to be strategized and have a certain amount of women, a certain amount of patients that are in the certain race, it will cap it once we reach it, and then it will be closed to enrollment. So no other patients can go in unless they fall into the category that's open. So that's one way that actively on a trial, you can track those things. Outside of that one specific trial, however, I do think that there is room for improvement to track even across companies. How many patients have we put across these studies that we've done? And then even outside of a company, there's not a way that I know where companies as a whole collectively are saying, in 2024, collectively, we've put in this many patients of this racial background, this age, this sex, et cetera. So I definitely think there's opportunity there, because right now it's usually study specific and maybe company specific, but not industry wide.
Okay. I mean, I'm coming here today asking you for these questions, representing, I guess you could say, those who don't know, those who want to know, those who are curious, so please, thank you, Tiffany, for that. Barry, I don't know whether you've seen anything, from the line of work that you do with Genesis Medical that can contribute to what Tiffany has said there. You're on mute, my friend.
Sorry about that. Myself, what I've seen has been an increase, probably in surveys that I've seen going out. Um, the surveys, you know, the questions that they're asking, the information and that they're capturing, they're pre and post. I've found that they've been able to use that as a good tool in order to track. I believe, as Tiffany said, that there needs to be more improvement and definitely more accountability on both sides as well.
Impact. How can we use data to create more impact? You know, thinking about the science and its protocols. Taya, Michael, don't know if you had any opinions on this.
Oh, my first thought is, what is the goal? Is the goal to get scientific data that impacts a certain community, or is the goal for all communities to feel included in the clinical research process? Because, you know, when we are doing demographics, we often ask people to self-identify. So when you're self-identifying, you may leave out different heritage that is important to clinical research if we're trying to focus on specific groups and what the outcome is scientifically on those groups. Or are we just trying to create that feeling of inclusion where all groups are included in the trial? I think that's an important question that I don't feel the community as a whole is really tackled or answered. It seems like, you know, we want everyone included, of course, like kumbaya, everyone come together, but what is the goal of that, right? Like, what are the goals? And I think that's where we need to have more direction from FDA. What are they expecting from certain trials? And these have real outcomes. You know, we have people with African American heritage that respond differently to certain drugs, and that can cause death even in some of these heart studies that we've had. We've had blood clots in women that take certain types of birth control medications, and we see more blood clots in certain ethnicities than other ethnicities. So there's real reason to focus and get that scientific push. But to me, it feels like the community as a whole is being more community driven, and let's make this more like, I guess, tangible for everyone. I don't know what your thoughts are, Tiffany or Michael. I'd be interested to hear, or Barry.
No, I agree with you, Taya. But I would say that there's a disconnect right now because often what's happened because of the media, there is a real misunderstanding of the value of DEI. There is a real, Taya and I were a part of some things that were created previously around the concept of what we call JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And the idea of being a Jedi warrior here for those kinds of things became kind of a call for us, and recognizing that there is a lack of justice in terms of the way in which patients are not only treated, but compensated for the data that they are providing. The importance of the real difference between equity and equality, and an understanding of the importance of diversity and inclusion in clinical trials. And as Taya has talked about here, it's meshing what's right to do and important for people's understanding of their involvement in their own communities, and meshing that together with the importance and the goals of the actual clinical trials. So if the clinical trials are to establish safety and effectiveness or efficacy in patient populations, then you must, by definition, study those populations and have them involved, which then helps answer that question about inclusiveness and belonging in the community. So you get kumbaya at the same time that you get clinical data.
Fantastic. Jedi. Did I hear
Yes.
that correctly? Jedi.
Yes. We call it
listen.
Jedi. We've done that. Taya and I were part of a group, are part of a group that we host every month.
I would love to be a Jedi. I'm doing my best Mace Windu right now with my haircut today, but nevertheless, it's lovely to hear that there are other, obviously, communities, initiatives, which are promoting a message which is very apt for this world of clinical. We're not talking about just clinical trials here today. We're talking about the language. We're talking about the ops. We're talking about the education, the language, and the trials, of course. Um, with that being the case, I mean, I want to remind everybody who's tuned in right now, please, to absolutely, please do put questions in the Q&A field, which is there to be seen on your screens. We've had some fantastic people agreeing with what Barry, Michael, Taya, and Tiffany have spoken about today. And it's nice to hear, I guess you could say, different ideas and additions to what obviously each one of you have said and spoken of previously, because it shows that there's real continuity and want for change. But this is how we educate ourselves to obviously continue to move forward. So my question now, I'm going to move it along slightly into more of the community and the relationships piece of clinical, this word clinical. How can we better educate on the importance of trials and effectively engage diverse communities? Think about the outreach, the marketing, all encompassing. I'm just going to throw that one out there. Whoever feels compelled to take the lead with this, I think that we might be on this topic of conversation for just a little while. Tiffany, you look like you're ready to go. Go for it.
Yeah, but Barry, you ready to go too? So let me know.
The floor is yours. Please go.
Okay,
Go.
perfect. So one of the things that I have seen a lot of communities doing here recently and many years ago, something that's still going on, are health fairs in their communities, where they're educating their community about different diseases that may be prevalent. They may do a grocery giveaway, do cooking recipes of how to cook vegetables in different scenarios, or, like new recipes, sharing it with the community. And so those health fairs are a really, really good way to just get the community open to talking about health, looking at their health differently, maybe making small changes. And I have seen that some clinical research sites will also have a booth at those health fairs where they're advertising, and educating there about the studies that they have ongoing. And they ask, does any of these studies resonate with you, or would you like to learn more? Or they could use it as an opportunity to even recruit for students that are thinking about a career move, and introducing clinical research as a career option to come in as a research assistant, a clinical research coordinator, et cetera. So those health fairs go a long way. But it is something that it has to be consistent. And so on the sponsor side, I've seen where some sites will ask, we have a health fair, our community outreach. Is this something that in our budget we can put a line item where a part of this study, this could help with recruitment? And so sites are using the sponsors to help, but they're also using other people and other businesses in the community to also contribute. So it's a standing every year or every 6 months, and not based off of a sponsor supporting it. So it's a sponsor supporting it would be nice, but it's just something that they're doing as a standard. And then those communities are getting more used to the health talk, learning about clinical research, and being more comfortable with it. And it's not just we pop up a health fair when we want something out of you because we need patients in our type 2 diabetes study, by the end of April. And so now we're present, and then we got our patients and we go away. It has to be consistent so they know and have that trust.
I hear you, Tiffany, and I
Mhm.
don't disagree.
Yes.
What I would say to that is, for anyone listening who has no idea about this space, they might
Yes.
challenge that and think,
Yes.
well, I'm I don't know, a 22-year-old Asian man. I have no idea about this
Yeah.
space. You're
Yeah.
asking me to come and be a subject,
Yeah.
that's the initial That's the second, I guess you could say, offense. Number one, you're asking me to come to clinical trials. Who are you? Number two, you're
Yes.
asking me to be a subject. What? I'm not a subject. I'm an individual, you know? So what's the steps, I guess, to circulate what you said beforehand? You know, because obviously I can go to a park, I can go to a superstore, you know, and see things on advertisement from marketing, from chemists, from physicians, and things like that. But does it not come from before?
Yeah, and it's that consistency piece. So so maybe the first year they get a flyer or they just pass by and they pass by the clinical research booth, they don't give it a thought. Or maybe they get a pin, or maybe it's that consistent that, you know, how we can see the Apple logo and now it's kind of ingrained in us now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the Apple product. It's that
Yeah.
consistency. So maybe the first time they don't even stop, they're not interested, but as you're talking, you're welcoming. If they have a question, if they overhear someone at the booth learning more, that's where the exposure can help. And then it's just a question. Oh, do you have anyone that may be interested in a clinical trial? That could be a question. Maybe not that person, but it's that exposure and that consistency, and not just popping up when they need someone, but like a staple in the community that they see all the time. So maybe the one year they pass the booth. Maybe the next year they double back because they're now having knee pain when they didn't have knee pain before, and now there's a study on knee pain. So there's okay, what's going on over here? Because now this resonates with me. But it's something that I know has worked well for many communities, especially the diverse communities that are not exposed to clinical trials, talking, being open to their with their practitioners, et cetera. It's a good segue without a lot of pressure because it's not in the doctor's walls in their clinic in that sense.
Thinking about, the opening reasons why, which I asked you all, Taya, you have children, what would you like to be seen in terms of practice for them to know more about the importance of trials?
Well, I think from my perspective, I have rare disease in the family. And so we have had doctors, try to educate my kids on different things that they could do. We've participated in a few clinical trials, and having that one-on-one human touch was really important with my kids, and just being able to explain things. I know Michael has some great ideas about adding clinical research education into public school systems, like getting kids educated early on about what it means to participate and what a clinical trial actually does. And I would also, add in that locations can be barriers too, right? We have places in the US where there's just no healthcare, or kind of like a healthcare desert. And we need to make sure that people can access these things. I know there's decentralization efforts going on to make things remote, but that one-on-one human touch is really important. And I would say that's the thing I would want for my kids. I would want them to have someone that they trust and can ask questions to, kind of one-on-one.
It kind of goes back to what the point was made earlier on about the awareness piece, the education piece. We're talking about some real heavy work here in regards to the systems of schooling. I totally agree with that point, Taya, which you made reference to Michael and his ideas and theories around that. If we all knew what we know now back then, things would be very different. We've all heard that saying before, One last question, because obviously time is against us, unfortunately, and it's crazy how quick this has flown. But Barry or Michael, why are certain communities not engaging with the participation of trials? I think about, for example, in the UK, when we had COVID, Black people specifically were not really wanting to come forward to go to trials. And then you'll have very few on media, on the TV, who are specific people in the public eye asking people to come to trials. What's the disconnect there?
Well, Steve and Barry, if it's okay, I'll jump in first, because I know you've got views on this as well. But it does come back to trust. It comes back to trusted sources also. So when you, within my consulting practice with BioMedWorks, one of the things that we've learned in working through things such as the AIDS epidemic and dealing with sexually transmitted diseases, topics that don't, they're not kitchen table discussions. What you learn is that people will seek information from trusted sources, and trusted sources these days certainly doesn't include the government. Trusted sources often don't involve physicians any longer, because physicians are many times viewed as being swayed by whatever the incentives might be for them to do particular types of clinical trials. So in each diverse population, you need to really understand what are those points. In many Hispanic communities, for instance, and in African American communities, it's the church. The church is an important part of their lives. And so hearing from their minister or hearing from their clergy is an important source of trust for them. And often they will get that information there. The media trust in the internet is very low in many cases. But interestingly, among certain sectors, AM radio and talk radio is considered a very good source of reliable information. So perhaps that education and perhaps that awareness needs to be thinking more about what are the trusted sources here. I'll share one unfortunate statistic with you. After all the money that's been spent by the CDC and by the FDA and by lots of government and private organizations, we still have a situation in oncology, where I spend a great deal of my time in the cancer field, finding out that only 4% of those patients who are actually eligible for a clinical trial ever enroll in a clinical trial for an oncology indication, for breast cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer. It stuns you when you realize that this is the one population that definitively needs clinical trials, because there are no real cures for most of these cancers. So clinical trials are in effect a real treatment answer. They're not just an experiment. They're actually an opportunity to get some type of a therapy or an approach that might be curative to you. So yet only 4% of the patients actually enroll. So we've got a lot of issues with trust sources, and we've got a lot of issues with language, as you brought up, and also having like to like, meaning people that look like you, talk like you, live like you, explain to you what it is that they're recommending.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. I'm keen to get to our Q&A section. We've got some questions in here, and obviously I like to have as much interaction as possible. So on behalf of those who are listening in and want to kind of get to you for some ideas and questions, this one comes from Eric, and thank you for your question, Eric. What strategies have you found effective when access to healthcare is limited? For example, studies that rely on specialists to enroll and particular regions are underserved for that particular discipline. Any one of you?
So my current role, we help move patients around. We help bring them in. We can even help them get visas if necessary, providing long-term stay options for them, transportation. All of these things can be done. Again, it depends on the rarity of the disease and the location of the specialist. But when you're dealing with a rare disease, you may only have one specialist that knows anything about that disease. So you have to bring the patients to them. So we try to make that as seamless and easy as possible for the patients.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll add to that a little bit of flexibility as well. Not necessarily for going to the specialist, but even for clinical sites themselves, maybe Saturday clinics, early morning or late afternoon appointments, a child care or like a sitting room where while the patient is in with the doctor, there's a room that is a safe space where their children could have snacks, watch TV, like a child care room, really meeting them where their population is. But I have been on rare disease trials. And one of the things that we did was bring on the vendors, like Tia said, that could help with transportation for not only the patient, but also their companion or caregiver. Hotels, extended rentals, like a short-term rental for 2 weeks, et cetera, to make it more palatable to be able to be in a clinical trial. So those are some other solutions as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I'll do one or two more, depending upon how heavy we get into the discussion. This is from Daba. Thank you, Daba, for coming in. He says, I've got a question. They've got a question, maybe too early or out of scope in the discussion, but can you foresee any advantages or disadvantages in implementation of AI and machine learning on diversity and inclusion in clinical trials? How can we take advantage of these tools? What a question. Barry, I see you chuckling away there. I'm sure you have a response to this. I'm sure we all have a response to this. Please take the lead on this one.
So my answer in regards to AI and machine learning, Chat GPT, with anything where you're seeking to get information from it, it also still originates with the information that you put in it. So it has to do with, the wording, the verbiage, the questions that you're asking in order to get the correct answer. So I would, urge upon, anyone that's trying to indulge into AI to make sure that, everything that you're asking or asking it to give back to you, that the information that you're inputting is definitely factual, been looked upon, researched, and that way you can get back as close to perfect as an answer as possible.
Thank you, Michael. There's definitely positives and negatives in this world of artificial intelligence and machine learning, isn't there? What's your thoughts on it? You work to C-suite, as you said earlier on, with your organization. You're part of the Jedi crew. May the force be with them. And what are your thoughts on something like this?
Well, I think it's in some respects it's almost unavoidable. There's no doubt that AI is going to be a part of everything that we're going to be doing, and I think there are two levels to this as we see this kind of falling out. One is clearly in the work saving and the streamlining and the creation of more standardization in the way in which we interact, and AI and machine learning can do that. Machine learning, as you all clearly understand, is really trying to get to repeatable solutions, things that will, remove errors, etc. But the second level is really how AI will help us rethink the way we're doing certain things. So while we certainly can, for instance, take informed consent, the kinds of forms and things that have to be understood and agreed to by patients who are enrolling in a trial, and use the active tools that are readily available now with Chat GPT or any other AI approach, and have them rewritten in a style and a language that is more conducive to better understanding for the patients that are going to be reading this. And I'm not talking about, trying to put some sort of, jive conversation in there. What we're talking about is actually trying to make terms understandable and
Yes.
take out a lot of the bureaucratese that's in this stuff that I'm allowing some of my biases to show here, but the reality is that a lot of this is guided by regulatory and legal. And so when you get that foreign language involved, you start to understand that no matter what we've done so far, people aren't understanding what we're saying. So if that's the case, then maybe that's a place where AI can actually be valuable to us.
Interesting. Thank you for being vulnerable there, by showcasing your bias there, Michael. Really appreciated and very brave of you. Listen, Raising STEM was all about impact. Creating a space where people can feel themselves and have understanding on the other side of the coin. In closing to this webinar, I want to ask each one of you if you can summarize, if possible, what a call to action might look like for something of this magnitude of discussion. What does a positive change look like to you? We'll go Taya, Michael, Barry, Tiffany.
So a positive change from my perspective would be seeing a real partnership between the clinical trial companies, the sponsor companies, and the patient communities. So really building those bonds and bridges so that we have kind of open dialogues just like this, where we can encourage participation, we can answer questions, and removing that fear that some communities have. I will pass it to the next person. Thank you.
Michael?
This has been wonderful to have this dialogue here, and I would take Taya's comment one step further and say that we really have to make sure that industry, academia, and the public, meaning people and the media that gets involved, that's so important today, that everybody has a common objective, and that should be, in this case, patient-facing, patient-driven. It's really not about selling drugs or trying to only be innovative in our clinical development. It's really about answering the needs of people, and I think if we can get around that, that's going to make a huge difference. As evidence of something that I think that's very valuable is just take a look at your screen right now. Look at who's participating in this. This is the future. The future is black and white and yellow and brown and everything together, trying to solve these things in a meaningful fashion. So I'm honored to be a part of this today, and I look forward to doing more.
Thank you, sir. Barry?
Just to piggyback on Taya and Michael, thank you both so much for your input and knowledge and insight, and the way that you conveyed everything today was very refreshing and insightful. Just to like I said, just to piggyback that with exactly what they said, because that's exactly what's needed. There needs to be commonality between all three, and there needs to as I've spoken earlier, be empathy and understanding between all three as well. Being open and willing to listen, to understand that the conversations that make us uncomfortable, we need to learn how to become comfortable in them so that we can truly address, the matters that need to be focused on and answered and built upon in order to build that trust back up, build that rapport, make sure that engagement is credible. And that the person that's speaking can feel confident when engaging as well. So all three, as you said, Michael, needs to be in a common ground, and that commonalities between them. And there definitely needs to be leading with empathy.
Thanks, Barry. And Tiffany.
All right, so I'm going to add a little bit of different perspective, but still going to. So I definitely think before we can start making some plans, so for the three different groups making plans, but more so the pharmaceutical sector, academia sector, is doing some research and knowing why. Why do the African American communities not trust? What is the root cause there? Because understanding the root cause may also help with their approach to actually driving out and doing the action steps. And there's one book that I have next to me. It's called Medical Apartheid: The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present. And it's a very good book, but thick, as we can see.
Yes.
To know the history will help dictate how we can move forward and tailor our conversations to be more empathetic. Like you say, Barry, we know what you've gone through. We know, but this is how this is different. This is why we have institutional review boards that are there for the patients. This is why we have an informed consent form that you sign before anything is done, so you can be aware of everything, the risks, the benefits. So learning, having a little bit of education, then we can start making a plan, and we may have a new lens and a new way of thinking about, oh, okay, so that's why this is what we would have to do for this population. The Native Americans, we might have to do a different a scenario. The Hispanics, we might have to do a different scenario, because we're educated on everyone's journey and why they're apprehensive to clinical research. So I think that needs to be at the root before we can really start making some real plans, because one size is not going to fit all here.
Absolutely.
I got to tell you, Tiffany, I love what you just brought up.
Thank you.
That education and taking it upon yourself to get that education. I can tell you, I made a 20-mile out of the way trip to Tuskegee last year when I was in the South. I was traveling, and I went there and I ended up spending 3 hours just trying to understand what the hell happened.
Yeah.
And when I got to the bottom of that, man, it just struck me so hard. I had heard about it in a textbook, but when you can see it and understand the land and where people are coming from and how that happened to them, totally enhanced perspective. So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
No.
it's great. It's great.
Yeah, and I like that, you know,
I
taking ownership. Sorry, Barry, go for it.
Oh no, I just want to put in a slight plug to everything that everyone just said, especially you, Tiff and Michael, about the education. Genesis Medical Research has constructed a diversity certification program to give you said education, to give you said knowledge about the atrocities, about the different health disparities amongst all the different minority and underserved populations, to give you that insight and education to be able to speak to every single different nationality in a way that that is acceptable and understandable to them, and empowering to them as well, so that they can engage not only into what you're saying, but into their own healthcare, making better decisions for themselves when they leave the office, for not only themselves and their family members as well, and passing along shared education that they've now built upon and learned from you, and ultimately putting them in the best positions for the best healthcare.
See, we can't stop. We meant to stop so long ago, but we just can't stop. We're so passionate.
We are.
Sorry.
Listen, plugs are free. Absolutely, 100%. Listen, I want to just take the time to thank you, Barry, Taya, Tiffany, and Michael. It's been a pleasure getting to know you personally and professionally over the last few months, and thank you for your advice, insights, and overall just what's happening in your own minds in regards to this. We could do another one, we could do another 3, we could do another 4. Okay, so I'm just plugging something here myself to say, watch this space. We might do a part 2. Okay, I want to improve continual efforts here on the Race and STEM network. So for those of you who are still with us, there's a link in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind just spending 45 to 60 seconds completing that, that'd be much appreciated. Do follow us on the Racing STEM LinkedIn page for all events and engagements. And if you found obviously today's discussion enlightening and insightful and interesting, please tag Racing STEM, you know, and reach out to obviously the panelists here for more engagement. We will look at questions. I will come to the panelists to get their thoughts, and we will have some form of write-up at a later date where we can address some of the discussions here in overall. So thank you so much to everybody who's been involved behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, Racing STEM, myself. We do appreciate you all. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay educated. All right. Take care. Thank you all.
Thank you.